Anodyne 2 Return to Dust is a surreal, lo-fi action-adventure game with a sprinkle of 3D platforming mixed in there. It's also the sequel to the 2013 indie darling Anodyne, which I'm personally quite fond of. Anyways, if you've never played or even heard of the original, fret not, because Anodyne 2 is divorced enough from it that aside from missing out on the fun of seeing a few familiar faces and locales here or there, you really don't need to have played the original to understand and enjoy the sequel. Well, understand may not be the best word to use, because this game is weird. You play as Nova, a newborn nano-cleaner and the designated savior of New Zealand. Guided by her two motherly figures, she embarks on a mission to find and collect nanodust. And naturally, the best place to find this nanodust is inside of the troubled individuals who inhabit the land. Like this reclusive hoarder who let her obsession with antique lampshades go too far and is now trapped in her home, wheezing and coughing herself to death from the dust. Nova shrinks down to enter the people's bodies and navigate 2D mini dungeons which are all themed around the person or object that she's inside. You solve puzzles, take out enemies with your vacuum, and make your way towards the big chunk of nanodust which has lodged itself into the victim's body, causing these issues. After completing each dungeon, you're rewarded with a trading card. These can be exchanged 4 at a time to upgrade the pillar at the center, which cleans the air and allows you to explore more of the world than you could before. So that's your mission. Collect enough cards and dust to fully upgrade the pillar and free New Zealand from corruption. Anodyne 2 establishes its gameplay loop and goals fairly quickly, giving you the impression that you're unquestionably doing good by eradicating dust from the world. It sounds simple enough, right? Well, it doesn't stay that way. It explores philosophical concepts with dust as the metaphor for human emotion. And I certainly didn't expect this game to evoke Demolition Man of all things, having you spend time with the outcasts who reject the dust-free world that you're trying to create.
That's why everybody's down here?
You got that right. See, according to Cocteau's plan, I'm the enemy. Because I like to think. I like to read. I'm into freedom of speech and freedom of choice. I'm the kind of guy who likes to sit in a greasy spoon and wonder, gee, should I have the T-bone steak or the jumbo rack of barbecue ribs with the side order of gravy fries? I want high cholesterol. I want to eat bacon and butter and buckets of cheese, okay? You live up top, you live Cocteau's way. What he wants, when he wants, how he wants. Your other choice? Come down here, maybe starve to death.
People who would rather live full lives free from the control and safety that comes from being part of the center, even if it means that they'll eventually die from it. I'm only scratching the surface of the themes that Anodyne 2 explores, but let me be clear, this game isn't all doom and gloom, and it generally keeps a pretty lighthearted tone for the most part. I mean, this is a game that has you spending time as a professional wrestler, so yeah. The writing effortlessly incorporates elements of humor, absurdism, drama, and even horror without tripping all over itself, and that's not easy to pull off. There are, of course, examples of these that I'm choosing not to spoil, but I hope that I've at least given you an idea of what to expect. When you're exploring the open world, the game is rendered in 3D, and as you can tell, Anodyne 2's visuals are a throwback to the PS1 and N64 era. And I've mentioned before that I have a big ol' soft spot for PS1 era graphics recreated today. Environments and characters rendered in this art style force you to use your imagination, and I find them incredibly charming. And seeing it applied to an open world 3D platforming adventure is something that I've never seen before. New Zealand is full of interesting areas and stunning vistas to take in, and I had a wonderful time exploring it, especially to the tune of Anodyne's beautiful score, which elevates the mood of any given moment, whether it be peaceful, melancholic, exciting, you name it. When you shrink into somebody for the first time, there's this adorable little rhythm game that you need to complete in order to enter the subject. And then the visuals go 16-bit, just like the original game. The pixel art is lovingly crafted and does a great job of representing the microscopic version of the world that you've entered. These 2D dungeons are admittedly a little bit shorter and simpler than I was expecting, taking from 5 to about 15 minutes to complete. But considering how much I preferred running around in the 3D parts of the game, I didn't mind this at all. And don't worry, there are plenty of extended sections of the story which take place in the microverse, so fans of the 16-bit art will have plenty to chew on. Just be warned that if you're hoping for fully fledged Zelda-like dungeons, these aren't quite that. In the same way that the original borrowed so much of its formula from Link's Awakening, Anodyne 2 seems to owe a lot to games like Ocarina of Time and Psychonauts. You make your way across expansive fields, discovering secrets that are tucked away for those who care to seek them out. You talk to countless NPCs who share their personal tales of woe and give you optional side quests. And to move the story forward, you must enter the mind or body of key characters in a stylized environment themed around their trauma. As the first 3D outing for this development team of 2, the results are impressive, but far from perfect. Nova's movement is a little bit stiff, especially if you're playing with an analog stick. You'll notice that she doesn't seem to have full one-to-one analog movement, kind of sticking to one of 8 directions when in motion, and it can be hard to account for, especially when trying to do precise platforming. The game plays like it's built with a D-pad or keyboard arrows in mind, which makes a lot of sense when you're in a 16-bit section, but in 3D the analog stick is essentially translating those binary inputs into the direction that you're pressing the best that it can. Her running animation could also use a little bit of squash and stretch to give the character more weight and personality. As it is, the movement is a little too robotic. Jumping feels good, and the inclusion of a second jump with unlimited hover if you hold down the button is a great way to make up for how stiff she handles otherwise. I never had all that hard a time making my way through tricky platforming sections, but it also never felt as fluid or natural as I know that it could with a little bit more tweaking. Traveling across these wide open areas would take a really long time on foot. Luckily, at any given moment, you can transform into a car with the push of a button and get around much more quickly. Why can Nova morph into a car? I'm not sure, actually. You just can, and that's fine by me. Let's just go with it. It's awesome. Aside from a sequence or two that had me retrying a few too many times because of clunky and unresponsive controls, the gameplay is pretty solid. Towards the end of the game, you can purchase an upgrade that reveals the location of the remaining collectibles, and it's mostly great, but I found that 2 of the last cards that I needed were oddly placed on the exterior edge of the map, nowhere near where they actually ended up being, which led to a frustrating evening of banging my head against a wall and accomplishing nothing. There's also a puzzle in there that forced me to pull out a pen and paper, charting out a map and taking notes, and I don't think I've done that in like 7 years. It was pretty rewarding when it was all said and done, but I wouldn't begrudge anyone for just looking it up when the game comes out. If only I had that option. Anodyne 2 is the kind of sequel that you always hope for. It goes in ambitious, new directions, introduces compelling characters, and adds a whole new dimension to gameplay, all while preserving and building upon the themes that made the first one a classic. The pacing definitely dips here and there during this roughly 10-hour adventure, but the game seems to be endlessly reinventing itself by introducing narrative twists, new characters, environments, and, well... Anodyne 2 may have borrowed elements from other franchises, but I feel very confident saying that there's nothing else like it out there. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and if you found anything that I said the least bit interesting, you should check it out. Anodyne 2 Return to Dust gets a 4 out of 5.